Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, author of the new bestseller, Vengeance, just out. And Callista Gingrich is about to be, is there a confirmation vote today, Newt?
Yeah, confirmation votes at 5:30 today.
Oh, and her book, Remember the Ladies.
The ambassador to... Yeah, so she can't go on radio or do anything. As an author, she's very frustrated, but she's very honored to have been nominated by President Trump to represent the United States at the Vatican.
Remember the Ladies.
Pretty amazing.
It's Ellis the Elephant, Another Historical Journey for Children. It's a terrific book. We love her children's books. My kids read all of them. And Newt, another huge bestseller novel for you as well. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Let's talk about what you heard from Bannon. We didn't play the full soundbite, but nevertheless, you know what he said. It's war against the GOP establishment. There is a time for peace, but now it's time for war, to take them out one by one. I think last week you said something about his plan that was said it was not the wisest thing to do. Tell us what your thought is today on what he has planned.
I think it's suicidally stupid. They're totally misdiagnosing the problem. The problem is that there were 48 Democrats who voted no on Obamacare and 3 Republicans who voted no. So instead of trying to beat the Democrats, of whom 10, by the way, are up for re-election from states that Trump carried, 6 are from states he carried by huge margins. I mean, if you took all the money Bannon's going to raise to defeat Republicans and put it into defeating Democrats, we'd have a majority of 56 or 58 votes next year in the Senate. We'd pass virtually everything. And I think the idea that instead of doing that, why don't we cannibalize ourselves and fight a civil war? You know, when we declared war in Germany, we didn't start by attacking Great Britain. So I'm deeply opposed. I'm a Reaganite. Reagan said the 11th commandment, don't speak ill of other Republicans. Reagan had seen the moderates destroy Goldwater. He understood that if you get into a party civil war, you guarantee the other side wins. And I disagree deeply with Steve about this.
What about the issue of the establishment speaking against Trump and resisting his agenda? I mean, when Jeff Flake says what he says about the president, which is all nasty, to me, that's a real problem, because the barricade, there are many barricades in front of the president now. One of them is a GOP Senate that refuses to do, the House of Representatives is doing a lot of great stuff. They have 270 bills waiting for the consideration of the Senate, and the Senate can't get it done. On most every issue, they haven't been able to get it done. That is a concern.
Sure, but let's take the example of Flake. And I've actually asked Louis Brogdon, who works for me, this morning, because it hit me after watching Bannon over the weekend. I'm very curious. He says he's not going to run anybody against Cruz. Okay, so I'm putting together the key voting scores for all of these senators he's going to run against, and I'm measuring their vote pattern against Cruz and against Trump's agenda. For example, Flake voted yes on repealing Obamacare. I mean, what's the beef? Yes, he wrote a book that was dumb. He admits it was dumb, and he may well lose the primary because of it. But you can't find an issue-based reason. The only Republican who, on an issue, who's up for re-election, who voted for Obamacare, is Susan Collins. And if Bannon wants to go spend $20 million in Maine, that's fine. He'll still lose. I mean, Collins is not going to get beat. So he's actually going to go out and run against Republicans who voted with Trump. That's what makes this whole thing, to me, mystical. I mean, what's the principal case? Can you be irritated with the establishment? Sure. Are some of them occasionally jerks? Sure. By the way, is the president sometimes not very wise? Sure. I love Paul Ryan's comment the other day. He was asked, what about the president attacking individual members of Congress? And he said, we've all concluded that's what he does. Mm-hmm. And he shrugged it up. He said, that's a fact. We're dealing with the president of the United States. He has certain patterns. He ain't going to change them. So you got to learn to live with them.
Jeff, on the issue of Flake and agreeing or disagreeing with the Trump agenda, you're certainly right on Obamacare repeal, but I think on the two major issues on which Trump was elected, on trade and immigration, he is directly on the other side of the president. And he was for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. He's for how the WTO has handled major trade disputes with the United States. He's not supporting what the president is doing on NAFTA and on immigration. He's diametrically opposed to what the president's trying to do on the wall, on enforcement, both interior and at the border. I think Jeff Flake has been one of the biggest problems in the U.S. Senate for the conservative populist agenda. He votes more with I think the old guard than he does with the future of the party, which is not a globalist future. The globalism is not winning anywhere.
Look, I agree, and I've gone around touting Trump's speech to the United Nations as a historic speech and a very important reassertion of sovereignty as the base of foreign policy. And I'm all for that. And I think you can find those two things. But he's going to, and I'm not trying to defend Flake per se. I'm just saying virtually every senator who Bannon wants to pick a fight with is going to vote for the tax cut. Virtually every one of them voted to repeal Obamacare. I mean, these are not trivial things. And I'm getting a list put together of actual votes. I suspect I'm going to have to go check it, but I suspect Flake voted for the appropriations bill that's funding strengthening the southern border.
Yeah, well,
but I'm going to go check. I'm putting together this week a voting list for every one of these guys, measured against Cruz and measured against the Trump agenda, and then let's look and see where it is. But I think it's a nice gimmicky PR device which puts us on exactly the wrong strategic future.
Well, I think when Bob Corker was freed up from having to run for re-election, he really spoke his mind. And when he ran to the New York Times and said that Trump could be on the verge of bringing us to World War III, do you think that is not a problem, Newt, or you think that's fine too to say that?
No, I think Corker and the president got into a contest of yelling at each other, and they each yelled. But I also think that when we get to the Iranian negotiations to pass a bill in the next 60 days, Corker is going to be Trump's ally. He's not going to be his opponent. And again, I'm not trying to defend these guys 100%. And I think in cases, for example, if Bannon wanted to make the case that he wanted to go into Tennessee, which is now an open seat, and run somebody to make sure that a good conservative won in Tennessee, that makes perfect sense to me. What doesn't make sense is to allocate this amount of money to trying to beat Republicans when you got 10 Democrats in states that Trump carried. And at least 6 of those Democrats are vulnerable.
Yeah,
but they're not going to be vulnerable if we focus our money on Republicans.
Yeah, I think that there might be a place for there's a place for what Steve's doing, and there's a place for what other people would do to defeat the Democrats. I mean, he's just one person.
Right.
I think everyone can play an interesting role here, and you know, I don't want to make this all about Flake, but he might have voted to repeal Obamacare, but his passion and his focus has been overwhelmingly to resist and ridicule Donald Trump, both in his book, obviously during the even latter part of the campaign, and on the critical issues of the day: amnesty, open borders, Trans-Pacific Partnership, Obama trade. He has been diametrically opposed to the Trump agenda, and again, if people think that wins, I guess we should look at how the voters in Florida voted vis-a-vis Jeb Bush, because he's kind of a Arizona version of Jeb Bush, without the 2 terms as governor under his belt.
I'm not going to single down to defend one single senator. I'm just suggesting to announce grandiosely we're going to oppose everybody except Ted Cruz. Mm-hmm. So first of all, it says to me, if you're serious about it, you're talking about $40 or $50 or $60 million. And if you're going to put that amount of money in, if you did it against the Democrats, you'd almost certainly pick up 3 or 4 or 5 seats.
Today, Donald Trump.
If you said to me, would I rather have a Senate that had 56 or 57 Republicans, one of whom happened to be Flake, or a Senate that's at 48, but Flake's no longer there? And I think that's a grave danger of what Bannon's doing. You're going to end up in a minority.
Well, that's. I think
that's the danger.
We have an echo on the line, James. Maybe. Okay. Donald Trump is having lunch today with Mitch McConnell. What would you advise each of them? How would you advise each of them to approach this lunch?
Listen to each other. The model I used as speaker was listen, learn, help, and lead. I listened to Bill Clinton, and he listened to me. We met for 35 days to get to a balanced budget. The only 4 balanced budgets in your lifetime came out of 35 days of listening to each other. Those two guys they're both mature adults. Trump needs McConnell in order to get things through the Senate, and McConnell needs Trump in order to increase his majority next year. And I think it'd be very important for them just to listen to each other. What are their mutual problems? And then McConnell has 3 big assignments. Get the budget through, ideally this week, so that you can get the tax bill through on reconciliation terms with 50 votes, and get all of these appointees approved. If you'll go back and do that stuff, people will think of the Senate very differently by Christmas.
Newt, I just had John Bolton on, who said that the failure of the Trump administration to both nominate and then force the vote on key appointees at the State Department especially has been very harmful, that most of the assistant secretary level people are either career people, not on board with what Trump's agenda is, or they're actually much more favorable toward the Obama agenda, and that continues to be a real problem.
Look, I couldn't agree with John more. John was my strong choice to be the number 2 person at State. He knows the building much better than Tillerson as a corporate CEO knows it. The 2 of them would have been a very effective team. And this is a problem throughout the entire executive branch right now. They underestimated how really important it is to get rid of the Obama people and to bring in conservatives and to have it across the board. And I think they're crippled in almost every department to some extent by how few people they've gotten, A, nominated, and B, approved by the Senate.
In your new book, Newt, a terrorist drives a truck filled with explosives into I guess it's a wedding in Washington, D.C., and that's how the story begins. How is this? I mean, how do you pull current events into this current stem line? This thing is a page turner.
Well, in Vengeance, I mean, it actually has 2 big national security implications. It's basically a story about terrorists getting 2 supertankers of oil and swapping them to the North Koreans for nuclear material, not weapons, but material, so that they can build dirty bombs to try to set off in American cities. And the joint effort of Americans, Israelis, and Saudis to try to find these things before they're used. And it makes 2 big points that I think are very serious for national security. One, don't assume your opponent is only going to do what you're comfortable with. So we're talking about the North Koreans, we're talking about anti-missile defenses. Well, there are lots of ways to deliver a nuclear weapon other than just firing a missile. So you've got to look at the total potential that your opponent can bring to bear. 2, don't assume that it's the U.S., North Korea, the U.S., Iran, the U.S. terrorists. What if there is a network of anti-Americans and the network is actively against us? It requires a very different kind of thinking than just thinking bilaterally. So
Newt,
there's a serious purpose to Vengeance.
Newt, first of all, every book that you write is a page turner. But I feel like I'm afraid. After every book you read, I'm afraid. I'm like, how are we possibly ever gonna stop all of these? It's a wedding, then it's an EMP, and then Newt Gingrich. Congratulations on another huge bestseller.
Thank you.
Your book Vengeance scares me. His books always scare me, but you can't stop reading them. So great. I'm going to say it's a beach read, but now it's a fall read.
With Ellis
and Ellis the elephant.
Be happy with Ellis and frightened, and frightened with Vengeance.
Remember the Ladies, Harvey Weinstein title, another Harvey Weinstein. Remember the Ladies by Callista Gingrich will be the new ambassador to the Holy See. Newt Gingrich, thank you so much for your analysis of this current family feud and the Republican Party and a lot more. Newt's book, Callista's book, is on our Facebook page and lauraingraham.com. Both great reads. Stay with us.